pregnant woman is violently shoved by a drunk gangster in a quiet roadside diner, but he doesn't notice the three weathered bikers watching from the back table. Their reaction isn't what you'd expect. No fists or chaos. Instead, something happens that leaves witnesses with conflicting accounts and the gangster emptying his wallet with trembling hands. What powerful words did the gray-bearded biker whisper that made a dangerous man crumble without a single punch being thrown? Morning sunlight slanted through the dusty blinds of Joe's roadside diner, casting golden stripes across the worn red booths. The air smelled of fresh coffee, maple syrup, and bacon, mingling with the faint scent of pine cleaner from the morning mop-up. Outside, trucks rumbled past on Highway 16, their sounds muffled by the diner's thick walls. Inside, forks clinked against plates and ice cubes tinkled in water glasses as the Tuesday morning regulars enjoyed their breakfast. Maria Lopez sat in booth 7, her 8-month pregnant belly barely fitting between her and the table. She wore a simple blue dress stretched tight over her round middle, and her dark hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail. Her husband, Carlos, sat across from her, his work boots tapping a gentle rhythm on the floor as he cut into his stack of pancakes. "I'm telling you, it's a girl," Maria said, rubbing her belly with a smile that lit up her tired eyes. "She kicks just like I did when I was little, according to my mama." Carlos grinned and reached across to place his rough, paint-stained hand over hers. "Boy or girl, as long as the baby is healthy, I'll be the happiest man alive." The bell above the door jingled, cutting through their moment. The sound was sharp, wrong somehow, too urgent. The door didn't swing open. It banged against the wall. A man stumbled in, swaying on his feet. His eyes were red and puffy, his hair greasy and sticking up in tufts. He wore a once nice suit, now wrinkled and stained, with a gold chain hanging from his open collar. The smell of whiskey wafted across the diner as he lurched forward. Flo, the waitress who'd worked at Joe's for 25 years, set down her coffee pot and straightened her pink uniform. Her mouth tightened into a thin line. "Sir, are you okay?" she asked, her voice firm but kind. The man's head swiveled toward her, taking too long to focus. I'm fine. Just give me some coffee." His words slurred together, and he gripped the counter to stay upright. 3 tables away, Maria felt Carlos tense up. She followed his gaze to the drunk man, then squeezed his hand. "It's okay," she whispered. "Let's just eat and go." In the back corner of the diner, at a round table facing the door, sat 3 men in leather vests covered with patches. Their motorcycles, gleaming machines with wide handlebars and saddlebags, were parked outside, still ticking as they cooled down from the morning ride. The oldest of the 3, a man with a gray beard that reached the middle of his chest and arms covered in faded tattoos, sipped his coffee while keeping his eyes on the newcomer. "Trouble at 10 o'clock, he muttered to his companions, his voice like gravel. The youngest biker, barely 30 with a fresh-looking eagle tattoo on his forearm, started to rise. But the bearded man placed a hand on his arm. "Wait, let's see what happens. Not our business yet." Flo brought the drunk man a cup of coffee, setting it down carefully. "Food menus on the wall, sir. Can I get you something to eat? Might help you feel better." The man sneered, revealing yellow teeth. "Don't need food. Don't need advice either, lady." His voice grew louder with each word. A small tattoo of 3 dots in a triangle peeked out from his collar. A mark many in town knew belonged to the East Side Kings, a gang that dealt in drugs and protection money in the next county over. Maria shifted uncomfortably in her seat, one hand on her belly, as if to shield her unborn child from the man's harsh voice. Outside, Dark clouds began to gather, casting shadows through the blinds where sunshine had been only moments before. Flo's hands trembled slightly as she filled the drunk man's coffee cup for the second time. Steam curled up between them as he drummed his fingers on the counter. 1, 2, 3, 4. Over and over. The sound grew louder as his patience grew thinner. "This place is too slow," he growled, sloshing coffee onto the counter as he lifted the cup to his lips. His bloodshot eyes darted around the diner, making other customers look down at their plates. Only the bikers in the back corner met his gaze steadily, which seemed to annoy him even more. Maria shifted in her booth, trying to find a comfortable position for her aching back. The baby kicked hard under her ribs, as if sensing the tension in the room. She winced, and Carlos noticed, his face softening with worry. "Should we go?" he whispered, leaning across the table. Maria shook her head. "I'm starving, and Dr. Chen said I need to eat regular meals." She glanced at the wall clock, 8:35 a.m. "Besides, you'll be late for work if we leave now." At the counter, the drunk man slammed his empty cup down. Coffee droplets sprayed across the clean surface. "Hey!" he shouted. "I need more coffee, and I need it now." Flo hurried over with the pot, her pink uniform swishing around her knees. As she poured, the man grabbed her wrist, making her gasp. "You think I'm just some joke, don't you?" he said, his voice low and mean. "Think you're better than me?" "No, sir," Flo said quietly. "Just doing my job." From their corner table, the gray-bearded biker set down his fork with a soft clink. His two friends tensed, watching his face for a signal. He gave a small shake of his head. Not yet. The drunk man let go of Flo's wrist, leaving red marks on her skin. She backed away, rubbing her arm. Old Joe, the owner, poked his head out from the kitchen, his white apron spotted with grease. His eyes narrowed at the scene. "Everything okay out here, Flo?" he called, wiping his hands on a towel. Before Flo could answer, the drunk man spun around on his stool, nearly falling off. "Mind your own business, old man," he shouted. The diner fell quiet. Even the sizzle from the grill seemed to pause. Carlos slipped his wallet into his pocket and nodded at Maria. "Let's go now," he said, his voice firm but quiet. Maria nodded, gathering her purse. As Carlos stood up to help her from the booth, the drunk man's head swiveled toward them. "Where do you think you're going?" he slurred, pushing himself off the stool. He swayed on his feet, pointing a finger at them. "I'm not done here." Maria froze, one hand on her belly, the other gripping the edge of the table. The baby kicked again, harder this time. Carlos stepped in front of her, his shoulders straight, his hands at his sides. "We're just leaving, sir," Carlos said calmly. "We don't want any trouble." The drunk man sneered, taking a step closer. Too late for that. He reached inside his jacket pocket, making several people gasp. His hand emerged with a phone, which he slammed on the counter. "Everyone thinks they can walk away from me." At the back table, the gray-bearded biker caught Maria's eye for just a moment. His small nod was almost invisible, but it sent a clear message. It's going to be okay. His leather vest creaked softly as he shifted his weight, ready to move if needed. The drunk man lurched forward, closing the gap between himself and Carlos. The smell of whiskey and sweat filled the small space between them. "You looking at me funny, man?" he demanded, his words slurring together. Carlos shook his head. "No, sir. Like I said, we're just leaving." "Nobody walks away when I'm talking," the drunk man shouted, spittle flying from his lips. His face twisted with anger as he shoved Carlos hard, sending him stumbling backward into the next table. Plates and glasses crashed to the floor. Maria cried out, her hands protectively covering her belly. Carlos caught himself against the table, knocking over a salt shaker. White grains scattered across the floor like tiny snowflakes. His face flushed with anger and shame as he straightened up, hands balled into fists. "You need to back off," Carlos said, his voice shaking. "My wife is pregnant." The drunk man's laugh was harsh and loud in the quiet diner. "Should have thought of that before you looked at me wrong." He pushed Carlos again, harder this time. Maria stood up, her belly bumping the edge of the table. "Please stop," she begged. "We didn't do anything to you." The drunk man turned his bloodshot eyes on her. "You shut up," he yelled, pointing a finger at her face. "Women should know their place." He took a step toward Maria, and Carlos jumped between them. "Don't you dare touch her," Carlos warned. The drunk man's face twisted with rage. "Don't tell me what to do," he roared. He shoved Carlos aside with surprising strength and pushed Maria hard. Maria cried out as she stumbled backward. Her hip hit the corner of the next booth, and she doubled over, clutching her belly. Her face went white with pain and fear. "The baby," she gasped. "Carlos, the baby!" A chair scraped loudly across the floor from the back of the diner, then another, and a third. The three bikers stood up as one, like a wall of leather and denim rising in the morning light. Their boots made heavy thuds on the floor as they walked forward. The gray-bearded biker led the way. He wasn't the biggest of the three, but something in his eyes made him seem larger. Those eyes, clear blue and steady, never left the drunk man's face as he approached. "That's enough," the biker said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried through the diner like a roll of distant thunder. The drunk man spun around, swaying on his feet. His hand went to his pocket again. "Who the hell are you?" he spat. "My name is Frank," the biker said calmly. "These are my brothers, Denny and Cal." The other two bikers flanked him, arms crossed over their chests. "And you just put your hands on a pregnant woman." The drunk man's eyes darted between the three men, then to the exit. For the first time, a flicker of fear crossed his face, but the whiskey in his blood pushed him on. "This ain't your business," he slurred. "I'm East Side Kings. You know what that means?" Frank's face didn't change. "I know exactly what that means," he said. "And I don't care." A nervous laugh bubbled from the drunk man's throat. "3 old bikers against the Kings? You must be crazy." Frank took another step forward. "Maybe, but right now, it's just you. And there are 3 of us." The drunk man pulled himself up taller. "I got friends who will burn this place down if you touch me," he threatened. Carlos had helped Maria back into the booth. Her breathing was fast and shallow, her hands still pressed to her belly. Everyone in the diner watched in frozen silence. Frank glanced at Maria, concern softening his weathered face for a moment. Then he turned back to the drunk man, stepping closer until they were just feet apart. "Last chance," Frank said quietly. "Walk out that door right now, or things get ugly." The drunk man's hand shot out, grabbing Frank's leather vest. "Nobody talks to me like that." What happened next was so fast that later, customers gave different accounts. Some said Frank moved like lightning for an older man. Others swore the drunk man threw the first punch, but somehow missed. All anyone knew for sure was that in one smooth motion, Frank had the drunk man's arm twisted behind his back, bent forward at the waist. No punches thrown, no kicks landed, just a drunk man suddenly finding himself helpless. "Listen carefully," Frank said, his mouth close to the man's ear. His voice was so low that only the drunk man could hear his words. As Frank spoke, the drunk man's face changed, first red with anger, then white with shock, and finally gray with fear. His eyes grew wide, and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool morning. When Frank finished speaking, he released the man's arm and stepped back. The drunk man straightened slowly, rubbing his wrist. He looked around the diner, at the faces watching him, and something had changed in his expression. I, he stammered, then reached for his wallet with trembling hands. The drunk man's wallet shook in his hands as he pulled out every bill inside. $20 bills, tens, fives, even loose ones. He piled them all on Maria and Carlos's table. The green paper made a small mountain next to their half-eaten breakfast. "I'm sorry," he mumbled, not meeting anyone's eyes, "for the mess, and everything." He backed away toward the door, bumping into an empty chair. His face had lost all its meanness, replaced by something that looked like a child caught doing wrong. Without another word, he turned and hurried out, the bell jingling as the door closed behind him. For a moment, no one moved. Then, all at once, the diner came back to life. People started talking in low, excited voices. Flo grabbed a broom for the broken dishes. Old Joe emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron. Frank knelt beside Maria's booth. "Are you okay, ma'am?" he asked gently. "Do you need a doctor?" Maria's breathing had slowed, and some color had returned to her cheeks. She kept her hands on her belly, but nodded. "I think I'm all right. The baby's kicking, which is good." She looked up at Frank with teary eyes. "Thank you, all of you." Carlos reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Are you sure, honey? We can go to the hospital just to check." Maria shook her head. "I'm okay, really. Just scared for a minute." She looked at the pile of money on the table. "What do we do with this?" Frank stood up, his knees cracking. "It's yours," he said. "Consider it the price of his lesson." Denny and Cal, the other bikers, had returned to their table. They sipped their coffee as if nothing had happened, but their eyes stayed alert, watching the door. Old Joe shuffled over, looking at Frank with a mix of gratitude and awe. "What did you say to him?" "I've never seen someone change so fast." Frank's mouth twitched in a small smile. "Just reminded him that actions have consequences, and that even East Side kings should choose their battles wisely." Carlos stood and held out his hand to Frank. "Thank you. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been here." Frank's big hand wrapped around Carlos's. "Some places deserve peace," he said, "and some people deserve protection." He glanced at Maria's belly, especially the little ones. Flo brought fresh coffee for everyone. "On the house," she said, her smile warm. The red marks on her wrist were fading, but she kept rubbing them as she poured. "If you don't mind," Maria said to Frank, "would you join us? I'd like to know more about the men who helped us." Frank looked at his friends, who nodded. Soon, they all sat together, Carlos and Maria, Frank and his friends, sharing a table as sunlight streamed back through the blinds. The dark clouds had passed. "My daughter was born in this very diner," Frank said, stirring sugar into his coffee. 23 years ago, my wife and I were on a road trip when her water broke. Couldn't make it to the hospital." He pointed to the very booth where Maria now sat. "Right there, in fact. Old Joe helped deliver her." Maria's eyes widened. "Really? In this booth?" Frank nodded, his weathered face softening with the memory. "Prettiest little girl you ever saw. She's in college now, studying to be a doctor." He sipped his coffee. "That's why we stop here every year on her birthday. Kind of a tradition." Outside, the morning sun glinted off the chrome of the bikers' motorcycles. Inside, laughter began to replace the earlier tension. Maria felt the baby kick again and smiled. She placed Carlos's hand on the spot, and his face lit up when he felt the movement. Old Joe brought out fresh pancakes for everyone. "Best in the county," he boasted, setting down the steaming plates. As they ate, Maria noticed how gentle Frank's hands were despite their size and strength, how his friends treated him with quiet respect, how the scary bikers from the back table turned out to be grandfathers and veterans and ordinary men who stepped up when needed. "You know," Maria said, placing her hand on her belly, "we've been stuck on names for the baby. If it's a boy, I think Frank would be perfect." The gray-bearded biker's eyes crinkled at the corners, and for a moment they shone with something that might have been tears. The diner continued its morning rhythm. Coffee poured, pancakes flipped, lives intersecting like roads on a map, bringing strangers together in the most unexpected ways.